Sofer also discusses why Yosef continued to go. And he discusses the importance of Yosef continuing to go to look for the brothers even after he could have turned around. So we had said earlier, Moshe Feinstein says Yosef was secure knowing that Yaakov never would be punished with his son dying because he was he just felt that wasn't going to happen. Or we felt, the Rebbe said, that Yosef bore no anger towards his brothers. He felt whatever God's plan would be God's plan. But now let's see what the Chasam Sofer writes. Chasam Sofer tells us that first he says, Yosef disregarded several bad omens that could have caused him to turn around right away. There were a lot of bad omens. There were three bad omens that Yosef must have noticed, and he still decided to travel on. First of all, what is that? So, first of all, the most obvious one is the one we mentioned already, that the brothers wandered on from the original place, that they were no longer in their original location, and that could have caused them to turn around. Number two, so aside from that, he quotes three ways in which Yosef's action contradict later teachings in the Talmud. First of all, if you shouldn't travel unless you're certain of the route. And Yosef got lost. So since Yosef wasn't certain of the route, he shouldn't have traveled in the first place. That's the first thing. Second thing is that there is a teaching in the Talmud that if you want to know what's going to happen that day, you should see what was the last thing that you studied in the yeshiva or in the Beis Medrash or in the study hall that day. So therefore, the last thing that Yosef had studied with his father, and we know this from later on in the Torah, when Joseph is, I'll just give me 1 minute, I'll say this teaching, and then I'll say what the Chasam Sofer says, and we'll take the questions. The last thing that Joseph had studied with his father was the passage called the Eglah Rufa, the calf that is killed because a person is found murdered on the outskirts of the town, and you don't know who the murderer is. The elders of the town, of the city, have to come and bring a decapitated calf, thereby indicating that this is an atonement for the fact that they were guilty in not protecting this person. So that's a bad omen be the last thing you study before you go out on your journey to the people who don't like you, because it talks about somebody who's murdered, wandering by himself in the wilderness. So Joseph, it's a bad omen, and Joseph should have known not to study, not to depart. And the third approach is that you can ask an innocent child what verse you learned that day in the yeshiva. And so whatever verse he says, you take his words as like a prophecy. In this case, Joseph met not a child, but he did meet a man. And the man said that your brothers said, Nasu mizeh. They've traveled from here, meaning to say they've left the family. They're not interested in being part of this relationship with you and Jacob anymore. You should have taken them. That's a warning that your brothers are no longer your brothers. Joseph ignored all of these signals because he wanted to obey his father's command. He was walking into, for sure, danger. So now, but here's the chiddush that the Chasam Sofer says. Here's a new idea. The Chasam Sofer says, the brothers were trying to save themselves. The brothers also didn't want to do anything bad. The brothers said, we have to go far away because if we're around Joseph, we don't trust ourselves. The brothers were trying to go far away from Joseph, and they were hoping that the farther they went, Joseph would be discouraged and would head home to his father. And so when they still saw him coming, when he found them after everything, they took that as a sign that all of this was meant to be from Shamayim, They took this as a sign that they were supposed to put an end to his evil ways. They took that as a sign. They didn't realize that everything had been arranged from Hashem to keep him alive. But the point is, if you look for signs in the wrong places, you can also do a lot of damage. So when we start making up our own message about what these signs are, then it's very, very dangerous. And the brothers took it as a sign that Joseph was still finding them. They didn't take it as a sign of Joseph's love for his father. They didn't take it as a sign that everything was preordained from Hashem, that Joseph was going to be great. They took it as a sign that they are supposed to hurt Joseph. That's the sign that they took. That was the big problem. Okay, so let me. I see Gray has a question, please.